Before we dive in, this week's episode is brought to you by my free cheat sheet, 30 Top Tips to Find Time to Write. In this guide, I give you 30 ways that you can find time to write in the small gaps that appear between the various errands and tasks and responsibilities that you have in your day-to-day life. Now, you might be thinking that you don't have any time to spare, but I can guarantee these top tips will give you writing time you didn't think you had. If you thought writing always involved a pen and paper or a keyboard, think again. If you thought you needed at least an hour at a time to write your manuscript, I help you reframe that. You won't be disappointed. Get your free copy of 30 Top Tips to Find Time to Write by going to emmadesi.com/30 top tips. Okay, let's dive in to today's episode. Alanna Irving was born and raised in Nottingham, England. After completing a bachelor's degree in classics at Christ's College, Cambridge, she lived and worked in Sydney, London and Nottingham before moving to Barcelona to do a master's in international relations. But it had always been a childhood dream of hers to write a novel, and so she decided that this was the time for her to do it. She wrote the novel and then looked to find representation for it, and in the end went with a hybrid publisher. And she talks to me about her experiences with that publisher, both the good and the bad. And it's a really interesting conversation to have because there are so many more hybrid publishers on the market now. A lot of authors are using them. A lot of authors are having success with them. But as with any deal, as with any publishing contract, there's ups and there's downs to both. There's positives and negatives to all of them, including a traditional one with, one of the big publishers. So really great conversation. And if you've been thinking about working with a hybrid publisher, going with them, but are on the fence a little bit, then this is definitely a conversation for you to listen to help you make up your mind about whether it's the right decision for you. So yeah, let's listen to my conversation with Alanna, and Abolish the Rose is her debut novel. Well, Alanna, it's lovely to have you here with me, and I just want to say a big congratulations on your debut novel this year. That must feel great.
Thank you very much. Yeah, it does. It's really exciting. Lifelong dream ticked off right there.
Indeed. So tell us about that. Tell us about your journey to writing and getting to this book being published.
Well, I've been writing pretty much since I could hold a pen. The first thing I wrote, I remember this, I must have been about 5 or 6. And I must have just discovered Aesop's Fables because I wrote a story called All About Sheep. So just a series of little stories explaining things like why sheep have curly wool and why they have horns. I don't know where that came from. And then sort of over the years that settled down into novels. I think I sent my first novel off to a publisher at the age of 14.
Oh wow, done you. That's so brave.
Yeah, I wrote that one during my English classes in exercise books by hand. I'm not sure I could write a novel by hand now. And this book I actually wrote the first draft back in 2016. And sort of left it and came back to it and left it and came back to it. And then last year decided that I should just go for it. So having had a series of novels rejected by pretty much every agent in London, I decided to rethink my attitude to self-publishing. Because I think it's always had a bit of a bad rap. People call it vanity publishing. And you kind of always want the external validation of an agent or a publisher saying, yes, this is good enough to publish, I will publish it. But I decided lots of markets are changing structure these days, with Spotify and YouTube are changing music and video. Why not change literature as well? So I decided to see it instead as investing in something that I've wanted all my life. Bit of an experiment, things I would do differently next time, but overall, really happy with it. It's amazing that there are people out there in the world I've never met who are reading my book.
It's thrilling, isn't it? It really is. It just shows how the power of the internet that we never could have predicted just, 20 years ago. But you said something there. So you said, you've sent off a series of novels that had been rejected by just about every agent in London. So that tells me that you've been, this isn't your first novel that you've written, but you've been writing others.
Yeah, so I wrote, this one when I was 14 is fantasy, and I think that's going to stay in my parents' attic where it belongs. And then I wrote historical fiction. I wrote one about a car crash. And you write a book because you want to write it, and then you get to the end and you think, oh, I should try and get this published. And then it doesn't get anywhere and you think, okay, I'm not writing anymore. This is too much heartbreak. But then, I don't know, some idea comes to you, or you just find yourself, this is, I think, the thing about writing. If you write to get published, you probably will end up leaving it after so many rejections. But if you write because you love writing, you'll always end up coming back to it, or at least I do. And then, I wrote, I do think it took probably that whole journey of, 10 years to, or more, to sort of, it's a craft, to hone your craft, become more skilled, write better. And I think when I wrote this book, I knew it was the best one I'd written. And even so, it went through many iterations until it reached what it is now.
Mm-hmm. It's so true. It's so true. We all need to serve our apprenticeship. And the first book we write is unlikely. There are a few unicorns out there, but for the majority of us, it's unlikely to be the one that we publish or the one that gets picked up. But it's great that you have had that 10 plus years of doing your apprenticeship and learning about the practice of writing and also knowing what you want to write. Because I think we kind of, especially as we're growing up, we experiment quite a bit, don't we? And we try different things until we find the niche that we end up slotting into. And sometimes it's not where we thought we would be. I thought I'd write literary fiction because that's what I'd always read and loved. I write absolute commercial fiction, but it's what I love to write, and it's just what comes out. And I think that can be part of the journey as well.
Yeah, I think you definitely need to try different things. And I think, some of it's just time and experimenting with different things. It's also reading different things. I read a book when I was about 16 that I really loved. It was sort of a very different style to anything I'd read before. And I think that really influenced me as well in the way I write. And it might be that I'll go back to some of those earlier novels and redo them, with the benefit of extra experience. Or it might be that I won't, and they'll just be my sort of, the first pancake that you make. That's always, always a flop.
Yeah. So, you've mentioned, I think maybe before we started recording, you were saying, it's been a learning journey going down the independent route, and there were some things that you would never do again, and there are some things that have worked well. So what would be some of the things that you've learned and you would do differently, that you will do differently the next time you publish?
Yeah, so the model I went with, they describe themselves as co-publishers, and I'm a little bit skeptical of that as a title. I think it's marketing because there tends to be this reputation around self-publishing. But so it's a sort of, you pay the upfront costs. It's like a one-stop shop. They give you all the services that you might then need. So editing, proofreading, typesetting, design, etc. And I will say the editor I had was fabulous. And I think the book really benefited from working on it with her. But I would say, I think the places to invest are that stage, the editing stage, and then the other end of it, which is the marketing, right? And that is, I think, where a lot of resources has to go. And the rest of it is probably not worth that level of investment, or you could probably do it differently, more cheaply. So I think I will go for a different model next time, but it's helped to sort of see where it's worth investing the money and the time, and where, you could do something slightly different.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yes, editing is always worth the money, I think, as long as you get an editor that you resonate with and who communicates in a way that you like. And but I certainly found that it's a relationship that you're building with that person, and as long as you get on, as long as you can communicate well, whatever you learn from that person is just so beneficial. And I hadn't expected that when I hired my first editor. I hadn't expected it to be quite such a lesson in craft and how to, especially the developmental side, how to put together this bigger form. And when she showed me, you know, where things were slipping and where things needed to be improved, the benefit of having somebody who knows what they're doing come in and give you their expert eye it's something you carry forward to every book, I think.
Yeah, I think, and you're right, it's a relationship, and you need to have someone that you sort of click with, like a therapist, I guess. You need someone who works well with you, right?
Yeah.
And I think I just got lucky that I did really work well with her. And she, I mean, for starters, it always helps to have a fresh pair of eyes on it, you know, to look at it without the 5 years of staring at the same story. But also, I think the way she works just really worked well with me. Sort of, she didn't give me any orders or even, you know, she just sort of maybe think about this, or have you thought about the way this works, and sort of just guided me down the routes to go. So I do feel like, you know, the work is still mine, but she definitely, you know, just pointed down a different door. Have you tried opening this door? Have you thought about where this door might lead? Things like that. And I really appreciated her style.
Oh, yay. Oh, I'm glad it went well. So there were elements that you didn't feel were as beneficial, and that you would do differently next time. Do you mind sharing with us one or two of those for our listeners?
Well, I do. So I have very strong opinions about commas, and this is one of my unique features. I'm very happy to have an in-depth conversation about an Oxford comma. No, I found the proofreader, he moved my commas. I was like, no, the commas they're all there for a reason. And, you know, it's fiction. It doesn't have to be grammatically correct. Especially as I write in first person, I'm really conscious of sort of the rhythm and the tempo. I don't move my commas. I think that's just a case of, you know, me and the editor clicked really well. Proofreader and I obviously had different opinions. And I just think in terms of the cost, because I mean, it wasn't cheap. I think things like proofreading, typesetting, design, I think could have been done better and definitely cheaper.
Ah, okay, very interesting. Yeah. So, but I think that's great that even though this is your first novel, that you knew what you wanted and you were strong in your vision for that and the voice and the rhythm of the piece that you were writing, and weren't afraid to go back and say, no, this is the way I want it for these reasons. So well done you, because I think I would have kowtowed. I think I would have said, okay, whatever you think, if you think that's right, I'll go with that, because grammar is not my strong point and I will always kind of defer to someone else. So kudos to you for sticking by your guns and knowing what your vision was, and that's interesting about the typesetting and the book cover design. Did you have a say in that as well, or did they do that for you?
I mean, so yeah, I had a designer. I mean, the problem here is probably me, because I do words. I really don't do images. So trying to transmit to this designer, you know, who's not read the book, what I want the front cover to convey. Really difficult. And I mean, I'd say I'm medium happy with how it turned out. It's potentially not the most impactful cover. I don't know how else to do it better for this book, which is my problem. And I just think, yeah, if I were to find an editor, pay an editor, and then separately find a graphic designer, pay a designer, I think it could have worked out cheaper than doing the one-stop shop thing, where you don't necessarily have a choice in who you end up with. You know, they have, I don't know how many designers, and they assign me one, and I have to try and transmit my vision to him. And if that doesn't work, then
yeah. Yeah, no, I'm exactly the same. I find that hard. I had to go very much to my comp titles and look at those and see what was kind of in trend at that time. But yeah, I mean, putting together a brief for somebody to say, as you say, someone who's not read your book, to give them, this is what I'm looking for and this is what I need and want to convey. It is hard when you've not done it before and this is your first time. But I know that, you know, in the traditional space, you don't get any say at all. So I don't know.
I mean, maybe that would have been better. Who knows? This is why I could never get a tattoo. I just can't do visual. It doesn't work. It doesn't come out right.
It is tricky. And at the time we feel like the whole kind of future of the book depends on it. But the good news is you're an indie and you can go back and you can change that cover at any time. So but one of the you mentioned that the editing was really, really positive, and then the marketing, that was very helpful with the marketing. So how did you find working with the partnership model press in that respect? Did you learn a lot from them and how they approached the marketing?
So what they were helpful with is, because I'm English, I've always had this dream of walking into Waterstones and seeing my name, right? And Waterstones are quite happy to support independently published authors, but you have to have a publisher. So if I sort of, did it myself, they wouldn't be able to stop me because you need to go through a distributor. So the fact that I had this publisher, I could get them to sign the agreement with their distributor. As far as I'm aware, Waterstones hasn't stocked it physically, but you can buy it via Waterstones' website. And I've been sending all my friends and family, please buy it on Waterstones, not Amazon. Maybe if they get enough orders, they'll stock it physically. So that was useful. And then, yeah, like I said, working with an editor who knows what she's doing, and you kind of, it is a bit reassuring as a first timer who has no idea what she's doing, to work with people who literally do this for a living. So there's a bit of a sort of a buffer of reassurance there.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we definitely need that. I'm just curious, with the press that you're using, can they also get you into libraries as well through their distributor?
Libraries I've not had much success with. I don't know how that works, and I have contacted a few, and that's just sort of disappeared into the ether. Possibly something I can put back on my to-do list to investigate.
I think you can go in and request it if it's and they can check their catalogues and see if it's available, because that's lovely as well, isn't it, to see your book on the library.
I grew up in libraries. I would love it if my local library, where I used to spend my Tuesdays, I don't know why it was always Tuesday I went to the library. Yeah, that would be great. No, that's actually a good point. I should look into that. And
so part of being an indie, whether you've used a press or you've done it yourself, is finding those readers. That's the next big job for all of us. And so promotion, in one way or another, is a big part of our career now. How have you found that, doing it yourself, and what have you been doing and what have you enjoyed?
Wildly uncomfortable is how I found it. I think this is probably not uncommon for writers, but I love to write, don't like to promote myself. So I gave in after years of holding out, and I got myself some social media profiles this year. So I'm on Instagram. And yeah, I've been contacting podcasts, blogs. I live in Barcelona, and they have on the 28th of April, is that right? Is St. George's Day, which is their patron saint, and they celebrate it by giving books and roses to everyone. So the city is filled with stalls selling books and roses. It's wonderful. And I actually did sort of a bit of a launch at St. George's Day, which was fun. Actually, my workplace was very supportive. They sort of hosted me. And yeah, apart from that, it's difficult. It tends to come down to word of mouth. Be that literally physically via friends of friends of friends. Parents have been getting all the book clubs they know on it, or via communities of writers. So there's a couple of writers groups I belong to here. I'm on some mailing lists back in the UK. Podcasts, blogs, releasing excerpts, things like that. It doesn't come naturally to me, and I'm struggling to get a sense of whether I've done it well or not. I think this specifically will be a thing that I will learn more about with each, if I do it again, each time is going to get better, because I don't think I was ever going to fall into this, and immediately learn how to do it perfectly. If there's a way of doing it perfectly, who knows?
Well, exactly, which I don't think there is. But first of all, I just want to say what an amazing festival.
Oh, it's wonderful. So originally I think it was girls gave boys books and boys gave girls roses. But these days everyone gives everyone both, which is much better, and it's great. Really nice.
Lovely. But I think you're not alone in your sort of reticence or nervousness around this, especially at the beginning. I mean, it is hard. And if you've never really used social media before, then it's a whole new world. So I certainly found this when I first published and first kind of got into this space, that, oh my goodness, there was such a steep learning curve in just about every aspect of putting a book together. And that feeling of, I've hit publish, woohoo, that's it, it's done, I've done my job. And then realizing, oh my goodness, no, that's just the beginning. Now I've got to find people to read this book. And I think, as you say, writers, most of us, we would rather just be on our own with our imaginations and do the writing side of it. And so the promotional side certainly is something that we have to get used to. And I think everybody finds their own comfort level with it. So it might be that actually you discover, I don't like doing podcasts, or I don't like being on social media, and in fact prefer to just grow your mailing list, which is the number one thing I recommend you do. But then you might discover, actually, I've talked about my book 5 or 6 times now and I really enjoy it, so I'm going to continue doing podcasts because it's just audio and I don't need to worry about video and that kind of thing. But I think everybody does find what they're most comfortable with. The author that comes to my mind now is a lady called Lindsay Baroker, who's very much, she's not shy exactly, but she's definitely an introvert. She prefers being at home, doing her writing, being with her dogs. And she grows her mailing list. That's the main thing she does. And then she also hosts a podcast with her friends. So she gets to kind of hang out with her online author friends. And that's it. That's all she does. But that works for her. Yeah. So I think everybody does kind of find their groove and what they're comfortable with.
Yeah, amazing. I think the the sale I'm most proud of, I was in a music festival in the summer in Margate, randomly got talking to a guy. Not quite sure why I brought up the fact that I wrote a book, but he sent me a photo of himself the next day having ordered it on Amazon.
Oh, wow.
Great.
That's wonderful. Yeah, so you obviously said the right things and sold it in the right way.
Mm-hmm.
So that leads me to tell us about your book. It's called Abolish the Rose. And what's it about and why would people enjoy it?
So I find it difficult to give the elevator pitch because you don't want to give away the plot. In essence, it's about a woman who's retired, who has this nagging worry that her life has been a waste. For reasons outside of her control, maybe outside of her control. And it came about, I was in a library looking for something to read, and I felt like every blurb I read was the same. It was, so-and-so was perfectly normal, and then something horrific happened, or so-and-so seemed perfectly normal, but something horrific had happened in the past. And I said to myself, fine, if this is what I have to write to get published, I'm going to come up with the most horrific thing I can and write a story about it. So I started off so petulantly. I was just being stubborn. And sort of as it came out, it sort of evolved into something. And I found I had a story to tell and themes I wanted to explore. And in the end, the joke's on me because it turned out to be the best thing I've written. So yeah, the title is, I'm not sure a lot of people get it. It comes from a quote, which is, the question of common sense is always, what is it good for? A question which would abolish the rose and be answered triumphantly by the cabbage. And obviously, it's my brainchild. I can see the resonance, but I appreciate that a lot of people can't. But it's sort of about how this character is wrestling with the fact, essentially, that her life has not been a cabbage, as in it's not been it's not achieved anything or produced anything, or, the kind of, I guess, productivity that we've come to expect. But maybe she's looking at it wrong, and maybe she can learn to appreciate the rose for just being a rose. And sort of, it doesn't have to achieve anything. It doesn't have to be able to feed people. It could just be beautiful for being what it is. And I don't know if by the end of it she's really come around to that way of thinking, but that's the sort of journey that she's on.
Oh wow! So it's very much a voyage of self-discovery, it sounds like.
Yeah, I think so.
Oh, beautiful, lovely. Well, thank you for sharing that with us. So what did you find? And actually, just before I go on, I think what you've said there about that petulant start and about thinking of the worst thing that could happen to your character is probably the best way to start, because I certainly work with writers who love their characters desperately and really want to protect them. And so as a result, they're not put through the ringer, they're not tested in any way. And we really do want to test our characters so they can come out stronger at the other end. So probably it's great that you did start that way and think, I'm going to really make life difficult for them and be horrible to them, because then you've probably given us that great kind of conflict that we're looking for, and that trauma that we want them to come through.
Yeah, and I also remember thinking things like, you have your character and you have this big, event, test, whatever they have to go through. And I was a bit bored of what I think of as Harry Potter characters. He's so good. He takes everything that's thrown at him and he, beats it, and it's wonderful. And actually, I wanted to write about someone who's just a bit like fed up, cynical, doesn't want to deal with all of this nonsense. Is going to do it begrudgingly, is going to moan about it. So I had a lot of fun sort of creating her and putting her through some fairly horrible stuff.
Good, but I'm sure she came out all the stronger for it.
Open to interpretation.
And so what did you find the most fun part about writing your novel?
Oh, that's such a good question. That's a difficult question. I don't know what's fun about writing. So it's she's looking back over her life in various different timelines, and because I started in the thick of it, when she's already been through it all, going back to that. Okay, so when she was 18, what happened and how did she respond to this? And maybe she was a bit more naively optimistic, and just sort of creating the paths that led her to where I started. Was fun. I mean, this is just what I like about writing, is you create this character and then you think, okay, what is she going to do in this situation? And it's just that, I guess, sense of, I want to say freedom, because obviously anything can happen because you are the creator, but also you are confined by who your character is. This is what I think makes a good book, is that it's not the plot that happens to the character. Like, there's a situation and it's how your character responds to it that makes the plot. So it's kind of like, what would happen if this person met her, or what would happen if, and it felt quite broad, because I had her as an 18-year-old, a 26-year-old, a 30-something-year-old. And it was nice trying to link up all of those strands to make them into one coherent journey.
It's like a jigsaw puzzle we're trying to put together.
Yeah, literally, in some, because it's not chronological, and at one point I got very confused, had to write all of the episodes out on a different color post-it for each timeline, stick them up on my wall, and literally just sort of move them around and be like, okay, so by this point you don't know that this has happened, so this has to go. It was fun.
Yeah. Wow, fab. And so tell me, where did the idea for the character come from?
It's a good idea, a good question. I think I don't know if this is a thing that's just too cliche, or but there's definitely a part of me in her. I'm obviously not retired. I think I have the same cynical streak as she does. So in some ways it was a bit of a warning to myself, like, look, you could become this bitter, essentially. And then, so it's set, she grows up, she's born in 50s, 60s, so she grows up before my time. So it was kind of creating something that fits the time. In terms of like a specific inspiration, she's not based on anyone. She was like very much something I created to fit this. I had this horrific event, right? What kind of person can I put through this event? Well, and I sort of worked backwards, because by the time we meet her, she's 64. And it's sort of, I started with, what would it be most fun to write about? Wait, I'm not explaining this well. So I had this character. I knew I wanted her to be older. And so you create the character, and then it's, this is not coming out of my head the right way. Sorry.
That's all right. No, it is. It's hard. It's often a hard kind of, it's a hard concept to articulate often, because sometimes it's not one thing, or sometimes it's something so abstract that we do, and then it's the evolvement, the character or the situation evolves. So it sounds like, though, it was actually, you had a situation in mind, and that was the catalyst for this, and you had to find someone.
So I had the situation, and I had this person that I wanted to come out of it feeling bitter and resentful of that situation. And so then it was working backwards, what input do I have to input into this event that makes the output what I want it to be? Which is possibly a counterintuitive way of creating a character, but I enjoyed it.
But you enjoyed it. That's the main thing. And also then you're sort of doing, perhaps unintentionally, what many of us have to do when we don't work from that backwards and bring the story up to date, is we have to go back and kind of and work out, okay, so how did they get to that point where I'm starting this story? So it's really valuable, and it's just a really lovely way of doing it, is including those backstories and those other interludes, including them within the story present, rather than coming up with it all but not using it in the actual manuscript. So it's a really great way of doing it. Yeah. So what now that this book is out, the best thing they say about when a book is out to stop you getting anxious about the release of a book and how it's doing is to start working on something new. So are you working on anything new right now?
I am indeed. And this is one of the things that I didn't like about sort of the first months of promotion, because I sort of think, well, for me, I've done this book now, I want to do the next one, but you have to sort of really commit to it. No, I'm writing a book. It's a retelling of a certain saga of Greek myth, told from the point of view of the women, in a world in which there are no gods and no magic. So I felt like women in Greek myth tend to do things because gods make them. So King Minos pisses off Poseidon, so Poseidon makes his wife fall in love with a bull. Okay, fine. But how could that story have arisen if there was no Poseidon? How can we, receive the legacy of the Minotaur, but what actually happened was potentially plausible? So that's been a lot of fun. There's it's like 5 main characters who are all related originally in Greek genealogy. And yeah, it's
and are you setting it in modern day, or are you setting it back in ancient Greece?
No, it's ancient Greece. It's just no gods.
Okay, no magic. And so did you study the classics when you were at university?
I did. My undergrad is in classics, which is a very interesting but of limited use.
Well, it will be of good use to you now. You could, because I think the retelling of many of the classics is very, people are loving it. This back in fashion.
So popular these days. Yeah.
You've timed it perfectly.
I mean, if I can get it out in the next little while.
Well, Alanna, it's been lovely chatting to you, learning more about you. If people are interested to find out about your current release and what you're working on, where's the best place for them to find you online?
So I'm on Instagram at Alanna Irving. I'm also at alannairving.com. And you can buy my book on Amazon or Waterstones if you're in the UK.
Yay! Brilliant. Well, thanks very much for your time, and good luck with the new book.
Thank you very much for having me.
If you're a first-time novelist who is struggling to either finish your novel or get those revisions to where you want them to be, then I've got just the thing for you. I have a small group coaching program which runs over 12 months, and over the course of that program I will help you fix those plot problems that you've been struggling with. I'll help you get under the surface of your characters so you really get to know them and what's driving them. And crucially for you, I give you that self-belief that you need to get you through the roller coaster that is writing a novel so that you can carry on, get to the end and get your book, your story out into the world so it can change people's lives. If that sounds good to you, if that is something that you'd be interested in doing, I know I can help you get to where you want to be. So book a call with me. Let's have a chat and see if we are a good fit for each other. If you're interested in doing that, then go to emmadesi.com/story builder. I look forward to chatting. Well, thank you so much for joining me today. I hope you found that helpful and inspirational. Now, don't forget to come on over to Facebook and join my group, Turning Readers into Writers. It is especially for you if you are a beginner writer who is looking to write their first novel. If you join the group, you will also find a free cheat sheet there called 3 Secret Hacks to Write with Consistency. So go to emmadesi.com/turning readers into writers, hit join. Can't wait to see you in there. All right. Thank you. Bye-bye.